Yeah, I'm I'm a little bit all over the place this morning, but I'm trying to embrace it all, and but very grateful at the same time, and always glad to be able to spend some time talking to you.
You know what? I think since the start of the pandemic and now as we transition hopefully out of it, I think we all feel what you just described, and that may be a good place to start. We can get into that a little bit. If I have the nod from Miss Brianna in communications, I'm going to get started. And I want to thank those of you who are in here early. And as for those who joined, they'll catch up. Just to get started, for those who don't know, we're talking to Dwan Dandridge. He is a lifelong and proud Detroiter. Leadership skills have been shaped by a wide range of experiences, including grassroots activism, running a small business, serving as a union rep at the UAW. He is the former vice president of Life Remodeled. Definitely passionate about creating blueprints to share power and to give people power, autonomy over their own lives. Dwan has a unique ability to define and quantify the value of people that come to the table with non-traditional skills. And we're going to get into that today because that's really important. And Dwan views the disparities in the access to capital from many angles and is focused on creating equitable solutions. Since launching in 2019, he has led Black Leaders Detroit in providing financial support to over 150 Black-owned businesses and nonprofits, totaling over $500,000. And I know this to be true because I had the honor of hosting the first event for Black Leaders Detroit. I heard the vision early on before a lot of folks, and to see where you are today, really proud of you. So with that being said, let's welcome Dwan Dandridge.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So we're going to jump right into this. We have a pretty straightforward format. And if anybody else wants to chime in, has questions as we go along, we'll get those in the chat. And at the end, if anybody wants to come on camera, they're free to do so. So to start out, I gave a little bit of it, but tell us, what do you do?
So I think I have probably the best job in the city of Detroit. I don't even think there's another one that comes close to it, right? So part of my job is I get to actually go around, connect, meet the Black entrepreneurs in the city and to deliver checks, right? So actually real checks to real people that are doing real work, be it providing services or products or leading a nonprofit organization. So I'm the CEO of Black Leaders Detroit, and we exist just to do that, provide access to capital to Black entrepreneurs operating in Detroit.
And so you talk about capital, and so that leads us to the next question. Who do you do it for? Who do you do what you do for?
That's a nuanced question, right? So if you're just looking at the surface, it looks like we're doing it for the entrepreneurs exclusively, be it if a Black person that's running a nonprofit or a Black person that's running a business, but it's also for the community, right? It's like we know that the small business owners, especially that can relate to and are from a community, are more likely to hire from within that community. So the residual impact on the community is the people that end up being employed by some of these places, or if it's a nonprofit that's youth focused, those that are experiencing and given access to extracurricular activities or whatever that nonprofit, this problem that the nonprofit is trying to solve. And I would also say, like from a self-interest perspective, right? It's like it stabilizes the city that I love and that is shaped and groomed me. So, thriving businesses with, successful or well-funded nonprofits is a better place for me to raise my family. So I would say it's for the whole community and myself included.
And let me back up one step, because I feel like I may have glossed over a little bit about what you do. And you know what you do, but I want to give context for folks. You raise capital and then you provide capital to Black-owned businesses. Let's back up one step. How do you raise this capital? Let's start there.
Yeah, definitely. So the way that we look to raise money long-term is depending on everyday people like you and I, right? So we ask or invite people to donate $1 a week. So $52 a year or $4.33 a month. Any of those options are available. But we asked them to do that and join alongside of others that believe in getting access to capital for Black entrepreneurs. And our goal is to use social media and other media platforms to grow the number of people that make that commitment to 1 million people. So in essence, we want to raise $1 million a week or $52 million a year. And that's the funding model that we've taken. We have definitely benefited from our nation's response to 2020 and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and the young folks that applied pressure to all of us to, seize this opportunity to make some changes. So we've definitely received a lot of support from the foundation and philanthropic community, but we also realize that that community, the way it's designed is it chases fires. So their response to the Black plight, I can already feel that window closing, right? So we don't intend to be totally dependent upon them for the long term, but we believe that you and I and others that are on this call and that care about fairness, no matter what their background is or their ethnicity, we feel like we can come together and make sure that, the Black folks that are out here doing this type of work have the resources that they need.
Let's drill down on that for a moment, because you're very specific. Black Leaders Detroit. You're about Black business leaders in Detroit. And when you talk about George Floyd and what we saw in the aftermath, the state and the country seems to have an aversion at times when we're very specific about a cause. And it seems to be very unique to Black folks.
Yes.
When we say it's about this one, it's something about this one specific group. When we say this is for this group, there's an aversion to that. That never deterred you one bit. And we're using this language, right, to kind of soften the blow. We say person of color, we say equity, we say change, we say hope, we see inclusion. You narrow that. And what you're talking about is capital in the hands of Black business owners in Detroit.
Yes.
Talk about that for a minute, because you have this grassroots model where people donate, people like yourself, me, and others, because we have trust in the organization. We know where the dollars are going. You do get some grants, you do get some funding from outside sources, and you say you can feel that window closing because the rhetoric around that is changing. If you can, just talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, so definitely, right? It seems like if we're talking about Black people from a position of power and directly, it seems like that makes us uncomfortable. But if we're talking about supporting a Black community from a position of like being pitiful, right? Like we're more comfortable with having that conversation. There's loads of organizations and well-meaning folk that are comfortable talking about Black poverty and a soup kitchen, right? And being specific there. But if you're talking about Black leadership, right, then you'll see people seem to have some type of discomfort. So as we've seen philanthropy respond, I can say like that we definitely had some folks that we talked to in 2019 and looking for support that told me we're not sure that we can support Black Leaders Detroit because we're more inclusive. And after the social pressure was applied by the young folk that was out there protesting during the middle of a pandemic, right? Some of those same people circled back and was like, hey, we want to know if we can look to give you some funding, and if you know any other Black organizations that we can provide funding to, right? So like our position is, if you want to stabilize a community, you make sure you're supporting like the leadership from that community. And we don't like to use coded language. We don't want to succumb to the pressure of saying, hey, disinvested, this, that, and the other. We all know that to be true. But there's funding out there right now that wants to apply pressure to us to change our language and not be so specific, right? Mm-hmm. And if we do that, then we have access to it. If we don't do it, we don't have access to it, right? So we've taken a stance, and you and I have had this conversation had conversation with others, and there were several that advised us to not like be Black Leaders Detroit. And they were doing it from a position that they wanted to see us succeed, right? But like, I want to call us what we are, and we are amazing. We're like capable. We are like as brilliant and as hardworking as anybody else that's running something in another community. And like, we are leaders, and that's who we support. We support the leaders in this community that we cannot do without, right? So
And
I
you
hope I
mentioned,
answered your question, bro.
no, you did. And you saying leaders, again, we kind of go to the response to injustice. We go to, and this is no disrespect to the faith community, a pastor, a ceremonial leader, right? But we don't go to business. If you run a coffee shop, you're a leader. You know,
Yes.
you and I are both fans of Narrowway Cafe. Jonathan
Yes.
and David Merritt are business leaders. You're at SIP on McNichols. The owner is a business leader. So it's changing that dynamic as well, right? Like if there's an issue, let's stop going to the one figurehead, get her or him to sign off, and now the problem goes away. What we're talking about is capital in a very specific community. Talk about, though, because you mentioned something also, you know, if you say Black Leaders Detroit, and then you have funders who say they want you to be more inclusive, I would argue that it is inclusive because we're all part of an ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Can you talk about that ecosystem for a minute in terms of how it benefits everybody, the more specific you become in your mission?
Definitely. Like, so studies show that, you know, we have big announcements and we have discussions about like tax incentives for really big businesses that make announcements about bringing hundreds or sometimes even 1,000 or more jobs to a community, right? But we don't have those same incentives and initiatives for like the small business owners. When if you have a couple hundred small businesses that only employ 3 people, right? Like you're talking about 600 jobs. So it's important that those business owners, those leaders get the same type of support that the bigger companies, bigger industry, like that they're receiving. So, you know, I love being able to sit in a place, like you said, a coffee shop right now that means a lot more to this community than just being able to come here and get a good cup of coffee, right? Like one of the things that we know David and his family is about providing other resources and opportunity to the youth, right? Through the program the other program that he runs, right? That's like kind of his life's mission, right? So I'm sitting in Detroit SIP. One of the things that they do is they open the space up to the community if they need to host the event. Most of the table, there's several tables in here that have a chess board on it, right? And on the weekends, they open it up to play chess. You have young folk in here playing chess with seniors. So you have organic wisdom being passed on across generations and folks getting a chance to interface where they wouldn't otherwise. Now, they might not make a whole lot of money in Detroit City, but our community can't afford to lose this type of space. So if we can be in position to make sure that they're getting like access to capital to shore them up, you know, through a time like, you know, COVID presented to the small businesses, we want to be there for them. And not only us, like the other people that believe in the work that we do enough to give us $1 a week, want to see stuff like this happen.
So we've covered what you do. We've covered who you do it for. And I think it's very clear to anybody listening why you do it. Let's get into some of the how. How does a company like Detroit SIP or some other small business access capital from Black Leaders Detroit?
So we make it real simple and clear, right? If you go to our website, blackleadersdetroit.org, there's a space there that just says get money, right? And all of our available resources come through the drop down. You tap on get money and you'll see an application for our no interest loan. We have the first and only no interest loan that's specifically set up for Black entrepreneurs on the for-profit side here in Detroit. We've actually replicated a model that's been used in the Jewish community for a long time. There's an organization called Hebrew Free Loan that's been doing a no interest loan here for 127 years. They gave us their blueprint, right? So we took that blueprint, tweaked it a little bit so they were custom fit the community that we're looking to serve. But we have a really good relationship with them. So in addition to the no interest loan, we have grants. And when we launched, right, at that event that you hosted for us on October 26th of 2019, our focus was going to do grants for the nonprofit side and the no interest loan for the for-profit side exclusively, right? But when we saw the devastation that the pandemic caused on the small business community, we decided to do open up grants for the for-profit side as well. And we decided that we'll continue to do that. And what that looks like is, you mentioned the number. Right now, we're at $578,000 dispersed by way of grants or no interest loan to Black-owned businesses or Black-led nonprofits in the city of Detroit. We just approved last week another $130,000 in no interest loans. So we're approaching and right above that $700,000 mark, looking to surpass $1 million before the end of the year.
In just 3 short years, in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
I think one of the lessons that I took from when I met you and I see where you are now, sometimes you have to just start. You know, we talk a lot about having these long-term visions and you know, there's corporate culture to have a big, hairy, audacious goal and these things. And sometimes you just have to start where you are. You know, if I met you, you always present yourself and say that I'm just a common man who loves my city. And I think that's an important lesson to share with people. You touched on it a bit, but what are your biggest challenges in doing what you do?
Right now, man, to be honest, and I don't even know if you and I got a chance to talk about this yet. Our biggest challenge right now is attached to the reason we launched the organization, right? It's like people don't believe in Black leadership the way that they believe in white leadership or leadership in other communities. And then when you do have like somebody that's innovative and comes to the table with solutions, you have people in positions of like power looking to co-opt, right? So right now, there's funding, again, that's out there that people are having discussions about going into a no interest loan for small businesses. Guess who introduced that idea to the ecosystem, right? We did. And now that there's like big dollars being discussed, you have other institutions that are white-led at the top, looking to position themselves to be the leaders on how those dollars are used and that those dollars go through those organizations. So I've had everything happen in the recent months from, you know, that, but also people looking to try to hire me to bring our vision and our mission up under their umbrella. And at the same time, realizing that I was not going to take the job offer, they offered it to our COO, the second in command, right? So there is, our biggest problem right now is like, as we are identified and seen as disruptors bringing solutions, now you have the external pressure of folks that may see us as competition, looking to take our legs from up under us. And I'm open-minded and optimistic enough to want to give a little benefit of the doubt, Mike. And I'm saying some of it is these people just doing what they were taught to do, right? Like the system itself is, we have different people in leadership that aren't coming from a place of hatred, but they're only doing what they've been taught and what they know to do sometimes. So they don't even know, they think that like, hey, these are some very talented people. We have a bigger pot of money. Why don't we bring them up under our umbrella, right? Yeah. As opposed to saying, this is an organization that already understands what we have yet to really learn how to execute as it relates to equity and equality, which everybody's like making a core value. Why don't we make sure that they have more resources while they lead and teach us what it looks like to do this? They're like, no, let's just snatch them and bring them up under our umbrella. Let them do it here. We take credit for it. And I'm like, no, man, later for that.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, some people don't, so we've all learned, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And so if you're willing to learn, but when you come to the table, instead of saying, hey, let's collaborate, you're saying you're dealing with folks who've been taught to co-opt. And if they can't co-opt, corrupt. And we have to be straight about that. And we have to be forward about that. Let's talk a little bit personal / professional. How did you arrive where you are? What we talked a little bit about in your bio, but what led you to this position with Black Leaders Detroit? What led you to be in a position to fight these battles?
Yeah, I mean, definitely growing up in Detroit, specifically Brightmoor, right? If you're from Detroit or Detroit area, like that might mean a number of things to you. But you definitely learn how to take up for yourself and others that like are important to you. Growing up in a neighborhood like Brightmoor, a city like Detroit, I think, you know, I do have an eclectic set of experiences, right? I haven't taken a traditional route, if you want to say what I do or what I've been able to do is successful. Like, I haven't taken a traditional approach to that. I don't have degrees behind my name, right? But I have been able to be in some places where you see people implement different things, like being a union rep inside of UAW and learning the nuances of working in that space where even as a Black person, you have a fight within a fight, right? So like you would have the UAW and your local union, but then you'd have a Black caucus within the UAW, right? So like we still would work and fight alongside of other laborers, but we still had a unique position because you would have good old boys networks inside of those, inside the UAW, right?
Yeah.
And if you weren't feeling the pressure from the company side, you would be feeling it from your peers. And I had, you know, everything from someone trying to get me penalized up to the point of being fired for wearing a T-shirt that says USA built on our blood, 400 years of free labor reparations now. And I had another UAW member go to labor relations and try to get me like penalized up to the point of like fired on a no interest, on a zero tolerance policy, right? And having to work through that and win that fight without help from my local representation, because my union rep had to represent both of us, right?
Yeah.
So I have that. Of course, there's being a husband and a father, right? Like I have an amazing wife of 22 years who's very strong within herself, and her helping me see some of my blind spots when it comes to the way that I was shaped and raised by our culture, right? And having not the same level of respect for women as I have for men, and having to be taught that from her in a very humbling way and sobering way, right? So I think that those are some of the things, but there's one that really positioned me well to do what we do at Black Leaders Detroit, and that's the 4 years that I spent as the vice president at Life Remodeled. Life Remodeled is a white-led nonprofit that does some pretty dynamic work in Detroit. And I was able to come alongside the organization when they were in trouble with their community engagement because of some of the blind spots that you would have being a white-led organization working in a space like Detroit. But I really wanted to learn how some of the white-led organizations raise so much money and so much momentum when I see some amazing Black-led organizations not able to do the same thing. And one of the things that I witnessed was that what we do is we see and identify a problem, we dive in head first with our own experience, our own passion, and often our own bank account. And that ends up lasting as long as it takes for me to either burn myself out or burn through my money. And I've been guilty of that. What I see some of the white-led organizations do is they identify funding sources, match that to a problem, build out the business structure, right? And the infrastructure of the business model, access the funding, then go to solve the problem. And oftentimes that's a lot more sustainable, but also scalable, right? So I hope I answered your question. You know I can talk, bro.
No, you did. This is this is what I wanted for folks, is to get, you know, just a very real, direct interaction with you. And it sounds like, you know, you've had a lifetime of challenges is really what led you here for yourself or your community. I know you to have a big heart for the people. And, you know, you're just speaking to the real challenges. And it kind of comes full circle back to George Floyd, because what led to that, the issues are economic. We don't, it's 100% economic. And that's why I wanted to, you know, I mean, it's, we get into this lexicon, these words that have no target or measurable, you know, components, right? Like hope, change, diversity, inclusion, equity, all that's great. What's the bottom line? And the reason that we have youth in positions to have a greater number of negative experiences with law enforcement is based on how our communities are structured. And when you don't have a tax base, when you don't have businesses, all of that is, I mean, there are some other social issues, but it's driven by economics. And I think that's essentially what you're talking about here. And I think that we do need to continue that conversation, because like you, I can feel it waning. You know, in the wake of George Floyd, you could say anything and everybody would listen.
Yes.
Now we're kind of moving away from that. And we're, like you said, we're going into crisis mode. So because of these economic factors, well-intentioned Black leaders, men and women of all genders, of all persuasions, use their own time, money, and funds because there's a crisis. They see the fire on their block. It's often right next to them, the house next to them. Yes. Right? And they start with the great intentions, but without that infrastructure that you're talking about, that burns out very quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I couldn't have put it better.
What's that?
I couldn't have put it better.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. We have a handful of folks on here. We do have a chat area. I just want to, because one of the things that we've set out to do with these fireside chats, Dwan, is to be respectful of folks' time and also to be very direct. And you know from doing business as well, if it takes you too long to explain what you're talking about, then there's a lack of focus. And sure. So we've been pretty focused here. But as we're drawing to a close, I just want to leave it open. If there's anyone from the Michigan Community Service Commission who has a question, or anybody who's listening in, who has been listening in, has a question or comment for Dwan.
Mike, if I could, first of all, I want to say just thank you from the bottom of my heart to Dwan. I appreciate you taking the time to be on this, and Mike, of course, for facilitating. I was just wondering, Dwan, if I know you had said something that organic wisdom being passed on from, I think, more experience to younger folks, and I thought that was pretty powerful. That resonated with me, and I just was wondering, two different questions that I had. What's the best advice that you heard perhaps when you were younger that has stuck with you? And then if you if there was an individual that you looked up to as a mentor, and a characteristic perhaps that they had that that has stuck with you, that you try to I guess the characteristic that you might have that would make you a good mentor for younger people that they could see. Because I think, what you're saying is tremendous. And as Mike said, we've had a challenge just getting folks on here because of summer schedules, but we're going to send this out because I think it's so powerful what you're talking about. So thank you again.
No, thank you. So thanks, David. I would say to the first question of something that somebody shared with me, I'm sorry, because it's not going to be super deep, this one, but it's really applicable to me right now as I'm, have two teenagers at home that are doing some real, 17, 16-year-old, having some real 17, 16-year-old experiences. my dad said to me once, when I did something that was disobedient, but also disappointing to him, he said to me, I had to face the reality that my kids aren't any better than anybody else's kids. But he followed that up by saying, but you ain't no worse either, right? Like, I needed to hear that then, and that empowers me now, right? It's like, it empowers me in two ways. When you're doing some of the work that we do at Black Leads Detroit, the cameras follow, people benefit, so people like want to sing praises to you. Remembering that I'm not any better than anybody else brings some balance, right? When my head wants to swell, you can see from the screen, it's already big enough, right? But it brings some balance, right? And it sobers me up. But it also helps me to think and dream big when I see other people having like large vision and going after big stuff. We're trying to create something at Black Leads Detroit that can be easily replicated in other cities that have large Black populations, right? So that's what I would say really stands out to me, especially as I'm helping my kids navigate through some good decisions that they're making and some poor choices that they're making. That's one of the things that stands out. And Malika Keeney is somebody that I have a lot of mentors. Like, you heard me talk about Hebrew Free Loan. Like, I learned to go after people that do really big things and they do it well, and try to convince them to teaching me how to do something. But Malika Keeney is somebody that I've watched from afar for over 20 years, back to when he was leading a charter school called Inseroma, and an African-centered charter school. And Malik has run bookstores, but most recently he has a food co-op. And they just broke ground not too long ago on, I think, a $14 million facility that's going to bring healthy food options into the heart of like a neighborhood in Detroit. And being able to see him with very little, take what he had, inspire people, and dream big and pull it off, right? Like, I need to be able to see somebody that looks like me and is very proud and unapologetically who he is as a strong Black person. I need to be able to see that, touch that, and have access to that. And I would say if I thought about like one mentor without us having like scheduled meetings or anything like that, that's somebody that I look to and I draw inspiration from.
Powerful, man. Thank you. Thank you.
You know, David, I tell you, I mean, we're going to have to revisit a lot of these fireside chats and create a platform for all of our speakers, including Dwan. And Baba Malik, as we call him, has been essential inspiration to me and lots of other people as well. This whole platform is about mentorship. And I think what happens when we think mentor, David and Dwan and others, we immediately go to older young man or woman mentoring youth, you know, helping them with homework or life advice. We really don't consider business mentorship and or nonprofit mentorship. And one of the things I'm going to put here in the chat, Dwan, that you and I talked about was that business mentorship is equally important to personal youth mentorship, because we don't have generations of wealth and this knowledge being passed on. So I appreciate that. And David, I hope that through our platform here, this can be a launching point for us to look at that. This whole piece is integrative mentoring. And it's not about integrating, it's not about taking, like, not integration that our parents experienced in the 50s and 60s, more integrated from a business standpoint, understanding that there are levels to mentorship, whether it's on the personal side or business side. So what you're doing and how you go about it fits perfectly into that. And I hope we can explore that further. And with that said, David, unless you or anybody else has any other questions or comments, Dwan.
I have a question. I'm sorry, Mike. I have a question. Hi, Dwan. My name is Bree. My name's not on the screen. So I just have nice to meet you. I have a question in regards to like nonprofits specifically, because my husband and I own a nonprofit in Detroit, and we have a lot of friends that are starting nonprofits. and they are always asking about funding opportunities. And I know on your site, you said that you can go to the site and click like get money, and there's different grants there that are offered. But for anybody who is wondering, what is the best way to stay informed about grants that you're launching? Do you currently have any grants that are open right now or that are launching to be open soon, and just information about it?
So thanks for that question, Bree, because there was something I wanted to say before I jumped off that hopefully can speak to that a little bit. So you can always follow us on social media at BL Detroit or Black Leaders Detroit. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn, right? So we normally announce through social media and newsletters, emails, and on our website when there's a new grant open. But one of the things that I got a chance to learn while at Life Remodeled is that most of the times, and most grants are received through some level of relationship, right? So I know a lot of people that apply for grants and see like the criteria and they're like, man, like we're right in alignment with that. But what happens is if there's not a relationship with somebody at that organization, like it's a shot in the dark, right? We've raised over $1 million from philanthropy since launching, right? And that's a short time, especially for like a Black-led organization in Detroit. You probably already know that. But a big part of it is spending time finding folks within the organizations that provide capital and building those relationships, because at the end of the day, they need to know you, trust you, and get a chance to see what you're about before they go to bat, right? A lot of times the way that thing works is you have a program officer that you meet with that's making a case for your organization to get funding from a board, right? So like if that program officer hasn't spent any time with the leadership of your organization and been able to do a somewhat of a deep dive and getting to know you, then they're less likely to feel comfortable really being an advocate for you. So you want to figure out how to get some time and meeting with them, getting to know them, letting them get to know you. But one of the biggest things that I would leave with anybody that's going to like view this later is when we talk about diversity for businesses and what have you, one of the biggest things that I've learned is how to be intentionally when networking and making sure that my network is diverse and that I don't have a bunch of people or everybody in my phone doesn't look or think like me or have access to the same resources and information that I have already. I need folks that can write checks and folks that connect me with people that write checks. So my network becoming diverse, or your network becoming diverse, gives you access to a lot more opportunity, a lot more resources than you would have if you're just connecting with people that look, think, and then come from where you come from.
Thank you so much for that. And I with that last thing you said, I think that's big because our nonprofit, we started back in 2015, and my husband's from Detroit. So, you know, everybody looks like him. He used to doing business with people like him. I'm from the suburbs, so it's a little bit different. And learning and understanding that sometimes people who don't look like you will help you more than people that do look like you. And that's not a bad thing, but just being open to diversifying your group and, you know, people that you're close with or that's helping you. So that's important. So thank you for that.
No doubt.
Well, Bree, you have Dwan's information, and so let's make sure we make that connection and do something tangible there. Dwan, I really appreciate the time that you spent with us. Hopefully, as we grow this platform, there'll be opportunities for us to re-engage. But thank you very much.
Thanks. Appreciate y'all for listening, and peace.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, making time during your summer. I know it's not easy. We have some dedicated folks out there. Kyle, Isabella, I see you. Thank you so much. And for the rest of you who've been joining us, thank you. Everyone have a great day, great weekend, and stay safe.